Antes de sumergirnos en esta historia, recuerda, una de las mejores formas de mejorar tu listening es escuchando historias reales y cautivadoras en inglés. Hoy no solo practicarás tu comprensión, sino que también descubrirás uno de los relatos más fascinantes y polémicos del mundo tecnológico. Así que escucha con atención, sigue las palabras y deja que la historia te envuelva. What you're seeing on screen is Mark Zuckerberg. He's not smiling. He's not moving much. He doesn't even seem human. He's in front of a group of senators answering questions with the precision of an algorithm, one after another, as if every word had been rehearsed 1,000 times. But this story doesn't start here, not with the cameras or the flashes or the questioning. It starts in a teenager's bedroom with an old computer, an open beer, and a broken heart, because everything changed the night a girl told him no. Mark Zuckerberg wasn't the most popular guy at Harvard, nor the friendliest, but he had something few others had: the ability to see the world as a set of codes, patterns, and invisible connections. While others talked about parties and exams, he thought about how to make people communicate more efficiently, how to understand them better, and, if possible, predict them. And yes, sometimes it seemed like he didn't understand how human feelings worked. But he understood, with terrifying clarity, how humans worked. That night, after being rejected, he didn't cry, didn't go for a walk, didn't call a friend. He opened his laptop, logged into his blog, and began to write. Harvard. Girls think they're better than you, but I have an idea that will make the campus see them differently. And that's when the first mistake, or the first experiment, was born. FaceMash, a website that showed 2 pictures of students and asked who was more attractive. A crude, superficial comparison, and above all, without permission. Mark hacked into the directories of every student house, downloaded the images, programmed the logic, and launched the site. It was just a joke, but the campus didn't laugh. FaceMash exploded in a matter of hours. Dozens of students logged in, voted, commented, and shared. The site was so heavily visited it crashed Harvard's servers. Yes, Harvard, the most prestigious university in the world, taken down by the emotional rage of a single guy. The next morning, Mark was summoned by the administration. They accused him of violating the privacy of hundreds of students, of exposing an ethical problem, and of ridiculing his female classmates. He, however, said something no one expected. What I did wasn't bad. I did them a favor. I exposed that their security is ridiculously fragile. He was on the verge of being expelled, but he wasn't. And there, balanced between downfall and redemption, he met 3 guys, the Winklevoss brothers and a guy named Divya. They had an idea to create a social network only for Harvard, exclusive, elegant, a digital club, a place where students could meet, talk, connect. They asked for his help to program it. Mark said yes. He smiled little, said goodbye, and never replied to them again. Instead, he began building his own social network. A similar idea, yes, but with a deeper vision, more ambitious, more dangerous. With the financial support of his friend and roommate, Eduardo Savarine, they registered the domain facebook.com. It wasn't a hobby, it was an obsession. Mark spent days locked in his room, coding, polishing, rewriting, until one night, Eduardo asked him something unimportant. How can I know if a girl in my class is single? Mark stayed silent, and then he got it. There's no network that tells you that, but I can make one. He added the relationship status option. He added filters. He added privacy settings. And within weeks, Facebook was born. The launch was modest. Only students with a Harvard email could join. But it was enough. The entire campus started using it. Not because it was cool, not because it was viral, but because it was useful. Facebook told you who your friends were, what classes they had, who liked what, and with whom you could start a conversation. It was like having a social radar, a human map, a mirror of the entire university. But that convenience came at a price. and no one noticed. Soon after, the Winklevosses found out what Mark had done. They confronted him, accused him of stealing their idea, and published a letter in the student newspaper. But no one listened, because Facebook was no longer just a social network. It was an extension of the human body, a new way of being present, of having a voice, of being seen, but also of being analyzed, of being segmented, of being manipulated. Although no one knew that yet, Facebook was no longer an experiment, nor a college pastime. It was a digital storm sweeping through the halls of Harvard, Stanford, and Yale, as if someone had opened a gate that could never be closed again. Every day, more and more students signed up, not because they wanted to be online, but because everyone else was already there. And you know what happens when you're not where everyone is. You start to feel like you don't exist. In a matter of months, Facebook went from being a simple student directory to becoming a living network, a universe where profiles spoke, walls breathed, and every user left traces of their personality without noticing. The idea was brilliant, too brilliant, but every light casts shadows, and at the center of that brightness was a tension that would soon change everything. Eduardo Saverin, the loyal friend, the first investor, the only one who believed from the beginning. He had put in the money, he had put in the faith, he had put his name on the papers, but he wasn't in California. While Mark lived surrounded by programmers, cold pizza, and giant dreams, Eduardo remained in New York seeking advertising for a network that still wasn't generating revenue. He thought he was doing the right thing, but thousands of miles away, his seat on the throne was already being questioned. That's when he appeared. Sean Parker, charismatic, seductive, and dangerously visionary. The creator of Napster, the destroyer of the traditional music industry. A young man who, like Mark, had touched power too soon. Sean didn't just understand Facebook, he saw it with different eyes, not as a project, but as a revolution. And he told Mark exactly what he wanted to hear. This isn't a site for college. Kids, this can be bigger than Google, bigger than television. This can be the world. Mark listened and believed. Sean introduced him to investors, among them Peter Thiel, PayPal's co-founder, who didn't hesitate for a second to put $500,000 on the table. With that, Facebook officially became a company, and Mark became a CEO. But there was a problem. The contract still said Eduardo owned 30% of the company, and Mark no longer wanted to share. Silently, with carefully drafted papers, Mark did something few friends could forgive. He rewrote the story, changed the shares, diluted Eduardo's stake until his 30% turned to dust, and when Eduardo finally found out, it was already too late. At the same time, the Winklevoss brothers also sued Mark for stealing the original Harvard connection idea. And although in the end both cases were settled with money, not prison, the wounds remained open. Because it wasn't just money that had been lost. It was trust. It was loyalty. It was the soul of the project. But Facebook kept growing, unstoppable, like a river that could no longer return to its course. In 2007, they launched the developer platform. Now anyone could create apps within Facebook, games, surveys, personality tests. And yes, those tests, that seemed so innocent, hid something else. Data. A lot of data. Billions of pieces of information about who you were, what you liked, what you feared. And Facebook stored it, organized it, and sold it, though not in those exact words. Mark always said his priority was to connect people. And maybe that was true. But in the process, he was building the largest psychological laboratory on the planet, one where you were the guinea pig, and human emotions were the fuel. In the midst of that enormous power, something unexpected happened. Facebook stopped being just a network and began to be a machine of influence. Politicians noticed. Marketers, too. Those who wanted to manipulate thoughts understood it before anyone else. And that's when a company with a name that would soon become synonymous with scandal came into the picture, Cambridge Analytica. but I'll tell you that in the next part. For now, keep this image in your mind. A 23-year-old young man in a rented house with a company already worth millions, but with an increasingly empty look. He had gained everything, but lost everyone, and he still didn't know the worst was only just beginning. Facebook was no longer a social network. It was an empire, an ocean of data where every like was a drop and every click a wave. Mark knew it, and at times he even seemed to enjoy it. But not everyone looked at his creation with admiration. In the shadows, there were those who had discovered the true power of that invisible network. And one of them had a plan that would start with a simple personality test. The year was 2014, and an app called This Is Your Digital Life became popular among Facebook users. It seemed harmless, a simple test to find out what type of person you were. Like those, "What kind of ice cream are you?" or "What movie character represents you?" quizzes. 270,000 people used it, and, without knowing it, gave the app permission to access not only their own data, but also all their friends' data, without those friends giving their consent. That legal loophole, that flaw, was the crack that brought everything down. Because behind the test was Alexander Kogan, a researcher who sold all that information to Cambridge Analytica, and they knew exactly what to do with it. They had a clear goal: win the 2016 U.S. presidential elections and put Donald Trump in power. How did they do it? With surgical precision. Cambridge Analytica used that data to build psychological profiles of millions of people. They knew what you liked, what you feared, what made you angry, and with that, they created tailor-made content. Ads, videos, posts designed not to inform you, but to manipulate you. If you were a single mother, they showed you fake news about violence. If you were unemployed, they talked about immigrants taking jobs. If you were religious, they made you believe that only one candidate would defend your values. And since only you saw that content, there was no way to verify it or check if it was true. It was as if they whispered a personalized lie in your ear, repeated so many times you ended up believing it. When the news broke, the world stopped. 50 million people had been manipulated, without knowing it, without imagining it, and Facebook had allowed it, through omission, neglect, or simple ambition. Then came the day he never thought would arrive. Mark Zuckerberg was summoned to the U.S. Senate cameras, microphones, senators, and an entire audience staring at him. He wasn't the Harvard genius anymore. He wasn't the visionary Silicon Valley CEO. He was a man on the witness stand, and for the first time he wasn't in control. He prepared for weeks. He rehearsed every answer with his lawyers, calculated every pause, every gesture, but there was one question that left him speechless. "Mr. Zuckerberg, would you tell us what hotel you stayed in last night?" "No." "Would you tell us who you've spoken to in the last 48 hours? Mark stayed silent, because he realized that was exactly what his platform knew about everyone else. The hearing wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't a victory either. Many senators didn't understand how Facebook worked, and others simply didn't know what to ask. But something had changed in public opinion. He was no longer seen as a genius, but as a cold, distant man, incapable of empathy. Some even began joking about the idea. Is Mark a robot? An alien? An artificial intelligence disguised as a CEO? But perhaps the truth was more human. Maybe Mark simply didn't fit the mold of the charismatic leader. Maybe his difficulty in gesturing, improvising, connecting had a name: high-functioning autism. He never confirmed it, but many suspected it, and that, rather than ridiculing him, should help us understand him. After the scandal, Facebook lost trust, and with it $100 billion in a single day. It was the biggest drop in the history of a tech company, but it wasn't the end. Mark knew he had to transform himself, and with him, his creation. So one day, he announced the biggest change yet. Facebook would no longer be Facebook. Now it would be Meta, a new name, a new purpose, a new universe, the metaverse. A bet to create a virtual world where the physical body didn't matter, where identity was fluid and reality optional. He bought Oculus, created smart glasses, and presented an artificial intelligence assistant called Yamaha, but something didn't quite work. The world wasn't ready, and maybe didn't even need it. Mark married Priscilla Chan, the girl he met at Harvard, had daughters, and bought a 400-hectare mansion in Hawaii. He stopped being the guy who slept on the floor to become one of the richest people on the planet. But despite his fortune, his advances, and his new ideas, the question still lingered. At what cost? Facebook connected the world, yes, but also divided it, polarized it, sold it. It brought us closer, but also watched us. And you, watching this, listening to this. Maybe you no longer remember what the world was like before Facebook. But there's something you shouldn't forget. Social networks connect, but they don't replace. Nothing replaces a hug, an unfiltered conversation, a real friendship. Mark once said in an interview, "I care about connecting everyone because well-connected communities can do incredible things." Maybe he was right. Maybe the mistake was that we connected too much, but touched too little. So before closing this story, take a pause. Look around you and remember this. Your friends also have bodies. Your emotions also deserve real space. Your time also has value outside the screen. Because in the end, no matter how many networks there are, how many algorithms exist, or how many likes you get, what truly sustains you is the same thing that has always sustained humanity: the warmth of being present.